We've all been anticipating how well Matt Rhule and this Husker team will do in 2023. And Rhule has made it abundantly clear that this team isn't the same as Temple or Baylor in their first year. We've heard him say multiple times that this Nebraska team is talented and should be competitive in every game. And yes, that sounds like Michigan as well. But we've all heard this song many times. Same old song, just a different singer. So I'm thinking I'll believe it when I see it. But I do believe we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves, as I'm just looking for improvement and progress this first year. After what we've seen the last 6+ years, progress is the first step, no matter what the record is. I mean, if we see that the tackling is much improved, as well as eliminating the many mistakes we kept seeing pop up in every game, then to me, Rhule was on the right track, no matter what the record is. But I'm also a true believer that if you do all that and eliminate missed blocks, missed assignments, clear up those lousy turnovers we kept seeing, then the record should speak for itself. I'm sure everyone has seen all the experts' predictions, which all have Nebraska finishing 5th in the Big Ten West. Well, there's a reason for that. And at the end of this video, I'm going to show you why everyone says 5th, as it's the safe bet. And trust me, when I show you, you'll understand why, as it's the safe choice for everyone to choose. And at the end of the video, you tell me what in the comments below where you see Nebraska finishing in Rhule's first year. Also, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, as we really need to get this video to 1,000 likes. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel, as the season's just a couple weeks away. So in this video, I'm going to show you and break down each game and tell you how I feel at this point and how the rosters stand right now, how well I feel the Huskers will do in each game. Because as you know, injuries and other circumstances could throw a wrench into all of this. But as of today, this is how I see Nebraska's season going. And at the end of the video, I'll give my Big Ten standings, as well as their win-loss predictions on how both the Big Ten West and the Big Ten East will end up, and who I expect will be playing in the Big Ten championship game at the end of the season. And I feel you'll be surprised by who I pick in the Big Ten West. And no, it's not Nebraska. Now, the Big Ten East predictions won't be much of a surprise to you. And I'll also tell you which two teams I feel will be playing in the national championship game come January. Will Georgia do what no other team has done before? That is, win 3 national championships in a row. So make sure to stay to the end, as you don't want to miss that. And on another note, I finally received my season tickets. As you can see, I finally received my season tickets, which I'll be giving away to members of the Big Red Country Club. The first drawing for games 1 and 2, one against Northern Illinois on September 16th, and the second game against Louisiana Tech on September 23rd. I will be drawing them and giving them away on Sunday, August 13th, with the winners being announced publicly on my community page that same day. I originally was going to draw them on the 12th, but someone asked me if I didn't mind waiting until Sunday the 13th, which really was not a big deal since the games are over a month away, and it still gives me time to get them to who I need to get them to. So Sunday it is. So stay tuned for that. And if you'd like to be part of the drawing, you can do so by signing up as a member of the Big Red Country Club. Just click on the join button you see below the video, right next to the channel name. Right now, I only have 2 members, so if that doesn't change between now and Sunday, then obviously those 2 members will automatically receive the tickets for the first 2 games. My goal here is to give away each month's home games a month in advance. So I'm doing August now for the September games, and I'll draw in September for the October games, and obviously draw in October for the November games. And if miraculously the Huskers somehow win the Big Ten West, I'll give that game away to one of the members as well, if they still give season ticket holders first choice of buying championship tickets. But it's been so long since we've been there that I'm not sure if the rules are still the same. So let's get into my predictions and see how well the Huskers will do in 2023. Nebraska actually starts early this year, August 31st, and for the second year in a row against a Big Ten West opponent. So no honeymoon for Rhule, as he's going to need to have these guys ready right off the bat. Now, Minnesota is coming off a 9-4 record in 2022, as they averaged 390 yards per game and 28.2 points per game. But they'll have to replace their starting quarterback plus their top two running backs from last year. So PJ Fleck's team will be starting the season with some unknowns, as they have a lot to put together early as well. But they do have talent on their team, including a deep set of wide receivers, along with a strong-arm quarterback. The question is, how long before this team puts it all together? I really don't see it happening in game one, but trust me, PJ will have them going by the end of the season. Now, defensively, they allowed 296 yards per game and 13.8 points per game, which ranked 4th nationally. And Fleck has 7 of his top 12 tacklers returning this year. So I expect this team to do very well defensively, and we'll probably have to carry this team early. Plus, Minnesota faces a far tougher schedule this season, so the record at the end of the season might not really reflect an improvement or show it, as it's going to be a lot tougher for them to just make a bowl game this year, as they only return 9 starters, 5 on offense and 4 on defense, but do have a lot of players returning with plenty of playing time from last year. So don't let the starters returning fool you. Right now, Minnesota is currently 7.5-point favorites over the Huskers, and I'm assuming that's based on the unknown and how this game has went the last few years. No one really knows what to expect from Rhule or the Huskers come August 31st, including the odds makers. But to me, if you're a betting man, I'd take the Huskers and the 7.5 points. I know I did. As you'll probably see first game errors and mistakes from both teams in this game one, especially with a new system and the other team starting a new quarterback and running backs. But at the end of all of this, I actually give the Huskers the edge, as to me, Rhule has plenty of tape on Minnesota and how Fleck runs his Minnesota team. And trust me, Rhule has already been working on this game probably for some months now, or a couple of months. I also know that Fleck doesn't have anything on Rhule and this Husker team. He has no idea what to expect or what Rhule or Satterfield are going to do. I know some of you might say, well, he could go back to Baylor or go back to Temple or go to Satterfield's South Carolina team, but trust me, them are different scenarios, different situations, so it's not going to be the same. So right now I would give the edge to the Huskers, with Fleck and them trying to start a new quarterback, new running backs, trying to figure out this 3-3-5 defense, which is a defense they've never seen and might not see again the rest of the year. Also, Minnesota's also going to be starting a couple of new offensive linemen. So this game to me has more Nebraska than Minnesota, and I see more of a problem for Fleck than Rhule. Remember, Minnesota's favored by 7.5, so there's more pressure on Minnesota coming out of the gates than Rhule. If Rhule loses, then that's what was supposed to happen. So to me, that's just a little too much for a Minnesota team still finding their rhythm in a first game of the season. matchup. So I give the edge to the Huskers, a slight edge. I see Nebraska maybe winning this on a late field goal, but it's going to be close. But if the Huskers do what they've done in the past by giving up late turnovers or committing stupid penalties, then this game can easily go the other way. But for now, I'm saying Huskers by 3, as I feel we'll see right off the bat the effects of Rhule and his staff, as we should see improvement. This would take the Huskers to 1-0 going into Game 2 against Colorado in Boulder, a game against Primetime and his newly built Buffaloes. Now, Colorado will be coming off a game against TCU down in Fort Worth, but I feel it's going to be a little too early for Prime and his transfers to gel, as his team will still be learning how to play with each other, how to kind of mix and go through this new system that Deion has, and trying to put everything on top of all of that. The good news for Deion is Deion will get an early look at a 3-3-5 defense as TCU runs the same scheme. Plus, Deion will have Rhule's first game against Minnesota to watch. So because of this, I do expect a closer game than most think. But because of how this game has gone the last couple of times, these two teams have played each other, I expect the Huskers to have a little more chip on their shoulder against Colorado, as there are a lot of players on this Husker team that were here and remember those games against Colorado, as I don't expect many of those transfers to even know how big of a rivalry this is, or even how them games even went unless they're told. So I believe the Huskers win this one and go home for their home opener at 2-0. Now, Game 3 will be Matt Rhule and the Huskers' home opener. And I know most of you want to just easily chalk up 2 wins for the Huskers' first 2 home games against Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech. But I think we've seen the last few years to assume any kind of win against any opponent is not a given. But under Rhule, I don't see them losing to Northern Illinois, especially in Rhule's first home game. So I do give the Huskers a win here as well against Louisiana Tech, as Rhule is not Scott Frost. Rhule's been around the block. He's done this before. So I expect Rhule to have his team ready for these two opponents. This would take Rhule and his Huskers to 4-0, matching their win totals from the last 3 years, or last 3 or 4 years, which is already an improvement. Now, I know what you're thinking, but this is where reality hits you in the face, as going into Game 5, I feel the Huskers will be facing one of the best teams, if not the best team in college football, in Michigan. As Michigan, which to me had no excuse of losing to TCU last year, and as bad as they played in that game, were still in it at the end. But in 2023, Harbaugh brings back 15 starters off that playoff team from last year, including 8 on offense and 7 on defense, along with one of the deepest and most talented depth charts in the nation. I believe Michigan's backups could easily beat most teams' starters. So as long as Michigan doesn't bite themselves in the arse like they did against TCU, and I do feel Rhule will keep this game close at the beginning, but by the second half, I expect Michigan to pull away, as Rhule just doesn't have the depth or the talent to pull this one out, unless Michigan comes out in here and falls flat on their face, kind of like they did against TCU. But I don't expect that. So I see Michigan winning this by 14 to 21 points, if not could even be more, which would drop Nebraska to 4-1 going into Game 6. Now for Game 6, Nebraska will be taking their 4-1 record to Champaign, Illinois, to face the Illini, probably battered and bruised from a very tough Michigan loss. And Illinois is no slouch. This Illinois team is one of the more talented teams, especially defensively in the Big Ten, but definitely in the Big Ten West. Illinois went 8-4 last year and held Michigan in check during their matchup falling just short 17-19 against the Wolverines. Illinois does return 12 starters, 6 on offense and 6 on defense, losing both their quarterback and starting running back, but bringing back the middle of their defense, which held opponents to only 274 total yards per game, which was first in the nation, and 12.8 points per game, which was good enough to be third in the nation. Now, they do have to replace most of their secondary, but if they manage to do that and their offense can find their rhythm under a new quarterback, expect Illinois to surprise everyone by the end of the season, especially in the Big Ten West, as the one thing Illinois has in 2023 is a pretty easy schedule, as they do not face Michigan or Ohio State this year. So could they be the team that wins the West? Maybe. So I expect the Huskers to go into Champaign and come out licking their wounds, dropping their second straight, which now puts them and puts the Huskers at 4-2, making us wonder, will they find at least 2 more wins so we can make a bowl game? Now for Game 7, Nebraska will head back home and get a little help as they go into their bye week, which will give Rhule time to get some players healthy, as well as figure out what he needs to do or to correct for the next game, as well as they'll be facing a Northwestern team that has more questions and concerns than the Huskers do. The Wildcats are coming off a 1-11 record last year, and yes, that one win was against Nebraska, but Rhule isn't Frost. And if you remember, the last time these two teams met in Lincoln, Nebraska looked like the Huskers of old, winning 56-7. So I expect Rhule to have our boys ready for this one, especially after having that sour taste in their mouth from that Ireland game last year. So I put Nebraska, and I give Nebraska the win here by 20 once this game is all over with. So this would take the Huskers to 5-2 and leaving them only 1 game short to being bowl bound. Now going into Game 8, expect this Husker team to have a little better feel of what Rhule and his staff wants, but keep in mind that their opponents are now in the same situation and are going to have a better feel of what they're doing as well. As in Game 8, the Huskers see the Boilermakers of Purdue coming to Lincoln, and Purdue returns 10 starters, 6 on offense and 4 on defense, but will be replacing their quarterback, but did replace their quarterback with Texas transfer Hudson Card. And by this time of the season, I expect Card to be playing well, as Card is the real deal. He's a dual threat quarterback who could cause havoc on most defenses. Now, Purdue's defense does only return 4 starters, but they did go out and grab a couple of key players from the portal. But with a new defensive coordinator, this could be too much to overcome. And yes, this is week 8, and I can see them doing much better than you think. But at the end, I expect the Huskers to have a little edge here as they are playing in Lincoln. So I give the Huskers an edge by 4, which will make them officially bowl eligible, as this takes them to 6-2 heading into Game 9. As the Huskers will then head to East Lansing to face the Michigan State Spartans, which the last time these two teams met was 2 years ago in East Lansing, with Michigan State winning 23-20. Before that, these two teams hadn't met since 2018, when they played in Lincoln during a snow-filled stadium that saw nothing but field goals, with the Huskers winning with a last-second field goal 9-6. And if you look at the history of these two teams, you can see that these two teams usually go back and forth with the home team winning every game, which wouldn't be good news for the Huskers if that trend continues, since this game is in East Lansing. The Spartans went 5-7 last year and returned 12 starters, but do return their starting quarterback. And I've always said that a returning quarterback is always worth extra points than returning other positions. They also return their whole starting offensive line, which means this team will know what they're doing. So I don't expect this team to be pushed around. The big question is, will their defense, which returns only 5 starters on a team that ranked 101st and 111th the last 2 seasons in the nation. So with them replacing most of their defensive starters, and with Jeff Sims and the Husker offense already having 8 games played, I could see this being a game that Sparty is going to regret at the end. So I'm going to give this one to the Huskers, and probably a higher scoring game than normally we see with these two teams when they play. But keep in mind, this is a game that wouldn't surprise me if the Spartans pulled out the win, continuing that home team's dominance in this matchup. So keep that in mind. But for now, I'm going to give it to the Huskers, which will take the Huskers to 7-2, heading back home to face the Terrapins. Maryland is coming off an 8-5 season last year, but they only returned 9 total starters, 4 on offense and 5 on defense. But they do bring back their talented quarterback, Tagovailoa, who can make things happen all by himself, along with their starting running back and one of their top receivers. But they did lose 4 of their offensive linemen, their tight ends, and the remaining wide receiving core. So Maryland will be trying to put this all together while Tagovailoa is probably running around for his life and making things happen early on. On the defensive side of the ball, you'll find 6 starters stepping in, and maybe by this game they'll have their feel for each other, but it's hard to say. The last time these two teams met was in College Park back in 2019, when the Huskers put a number on them, winning 54-7. But keep in mind, that was without Tagovailoa. But I'm going to give this one Iowa Hawkeyes. I'm sure I will be looking for some revenge after last year's game, as the Huskers were able to pull out their final win last year and finally brought back the Heroes Trophy. Now, Iowa did go out and hire a new offensive coordinator and grabbed a quarterback transfer that can throw the ball, which has always been Iowa's problem these last few years. Quarterback transfer Cade McNamara, who is on in Michigan's playoff team last year, is going to be leading this Iowa team. And the question is he the answer to getting them over the top offensively? Defensively, Iowa had one of the best defenses in the nation last year. And this year, this D might even be better, as Iowa returns 15 starters, 8 on offense and 7 on defense. And I do expect this defense to be one of the best in the nation once again. But I'm just not sold on the offense, as their line was pretty bad last year. But I'm not sure they did enough to improve on it. Yes, McNamara is coming from a playoff team. I'm sure I will be looking for some revenge after last year's game, as the Huskers were able to pull out their final win last year and finally brought back the Heroes Trophy. Now, Iowa did go out and hire a new offensive coordinator and grabbed a quarterback transfer that can throw the ball, which has always been Iowa's problem these last few years. Quarterback transfer Cade McNamara, who is on in Michigan's playoff team last year, is going to be leading this Iowa team. And the question is he the answer to getting them over the top offensively? Defensively, Iowa had one of the best defenses in the nation last year. And this year, this D might even be better, as Iowa returns 15 starters, 8 on offense and 7 on defense. And I do expect this defense to be one of the best in the nation once again. But I'm just not sold on the offense, as their line was pretty bad last year. But I'm not sure they did enough to improve on it. Yes, McNamara is coming from a playoff team in Michigan, and I feel he's going to learn very quickly that Iowa is not Michigan, as he doesn't have the support staff around him at Iowa as he did when he was playing with Michigan. So there's going to be a big drop-off in support staff with Iowa. There's a reason why top players play together at the top level, as when you surround yourself with other top talent, it's a lot easier to shine. I'm also not sold on Iowa's offensive line or their receiving core, as they're probably a couple years away from fixing those two and getting the experience they need. Now, I do expect Iowa to win a few close games throughout the year and during the season due to this defense, but I'm going to give this one to the Huskers in Lincoln in an extremely close game. But this is another game that could easily go to the Hawkeyes. But for now, I'm going to give this one to the Huskers, especially since Iowa will be coming off a huge physical game defensively against Illinois the weekend before this one. And with only 6 days between that game and the Husker game, I feel is a little too much. So I give this one to the Huskers, say by 1 or 2 points, giving the Huskers a final record of 9-3. So where does this put the Huskers in the Big Ten West? Let's first look at the Big Ten East and where I feel they will end up at the end of the season. I have Michigan here taking the top spot, as I feel Michigan is one of the best 2 teams in the country. Penn State will take second, as I feel they'll beat Ohio State this season, which puts Ohio State at third. Michigan State will hold up 4th place, while Maryland, Rutgers, and Indiana will round out the remaining Big Ten East standings. Now, for the Big Ten West, as you see, I have Illinois coming out on top, with Iowa coming in second, which means Iowa's last 2 games will decide if they win the West or not, as I feel if they beat Illinois or Nebraska, they'll lock up the West. But I think the Illini are a little better team, and with Iowa going to Champaign, Illinois for that game, I give the edge to Illinois. And so I see Illinois winning that game, and then again them heading back home in a short week to face a Nebraska team, probably after facing a very physical Illinois team. That's the reason why I give the Huskers an edge there. So that puts Iowa second, which ends up leaving Nebraska finishing third, which I will be very satisfied with after what we've seen the last few years. With Wisconsin coming in 4th, Minnesota 5th, while Purdue and Northwestern round out the Big Ten West standings. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking, there's no way the Huskers are going to finish third. And I wouldn't say no way, but it is possible. And I told you at the beginning of this video that I'll explain why everyone has the Huskers 5th. So let me here explain, as I told you, there are 3 or 4 games that I have Nebraska edging out, but could easily go either way. Let's take the Iowa game. If Iowa finds a way to win this game on Black Friday, then you'll see here in the standings, you'll then have Iowa winning the West, Illinois finishing second, with Wisconsin getting third by them beating the Huskers during the season. This would drop the Huskers to 4th, while 5th through 7th remain the same. Now, let's take the first game against Minnesota. So They are heavily favored right now. So let's say Minnesota does pull that game out. They pull that one out along with Iowa winning the matchup against the Huskers. Then the standings would look like this. You would still have Iowa winning the division, Illinois second, and Wisconsin still holding the top 3 spots. But because of Minnesota winning their matchup with the Huskers, this would place Minnesota at 4th and Nebraska 5th, where everyone else has the Huskers. From here, you can see that even if the Huskers lose another one of those close games I brought up, that it still leaves the Huskers at 5th. As well, if they lose a 4th game, as I told you, they could easily lose 4 of them games that I thought would be really close. So even if they lost all 4, making them 5 and 7 for the year, as you see, Nebraska is consistently 5th place with 5 to 7 wins. So to me, it was an easy prediction for everyone to say Huskers 5th. But are you really predicting anything by saying that? Are you just taking the easy way? So I'm coming out and saying I see the Huskers being anywhere from 2nd to 5th. But for now, I'm giving the Huskers 3rd at 9-3, or depending who they lose that 4th game, maybe 4th. But to me, no lower than 5th. So I don't see them going worse than that. I could see even them being 7-5, 8-4, and finishing 4th or 5th. But right now, I'm going to leave them where they're at. So you tell me what you think. Do you see the Huskers doing better than 5th? Could they get to 2nd? Tell me in the comments below where you feel the Huskers will end up at the end of the season. Also, I told you I'd let you know which 2 teams will be playing for the national championship come January. Well, my top 2 teams, I feel, by the end of all this, that will be facing each other in the national championship game are Michigan and Georgia. So I have Michigan facing Georgia for the national championship prize and the ultimate prize in January come 2024. Now, I want to thank everyone for all their support. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. I know you haven't seen me a while, and you probably noticed I've lost extremely a lot of weight. As you know, I've been dealing with cancer, been going through some treatment. It's hard to speak for a long period of time. Even this video, I kind of got to piece it together. Treatment is now over, so it's going to take a little while to get better. But I have lost probably 80 pounds since all this started. But I want to thank everyone for all their prayers and support, as I couldn't have done it without you. So thank you. So again, until the next video, go Big Red.